Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I am so happy that you are here with us. My name is Barton Seaver. I'm a chef, author, proud father, and resident of the delicious, jagged, ragged coast of Maine, where I am joining you from today on my little saltwater farm with my heritage chickens out back. A unexpectedly beautiful December day after a wonderful holiday that I'm joining you here from. And hey, I appreciate you joining for this, the last of the office hours for 2020, this our year of Beelzebub. And hey, what a great way to send it on out. I know there's a couple more events coming up on Ruby, so please do check out the upcoming calendar, including my next event, which is Thursday after next, which will be the Feast of the Seven Fishes, one of my very favorite of the sort of ritual meals that we gather for in our house together every year. But hey, this is Ruby. This is wonderful. You are all wonderful. Any of you who have joined me before, welcome back. You know that, well, we like to have fun in these, and I appreciate you joining. Those of you who are new, I like to always say a couple of things. The first is that feeding people is an act of love. It is an act of kindness, and when you do so, you are improving the world, even if it's just dinner on Tuesday night. So that you are interested in food, learning more about it, more about feeding people. Thank you. The world needs you and what you're doing. The other thing that I like to do is to talk about a few things that I am thankful for because, well, gratitude is a very powerful thing, but only when expressed. And the things I am grateful for are myriad. But first amongst them, if I may share some positive personal news with you, my most recent cookbook, The Joy of Seafood. It's about just under 1,000 recipes for just about 100 different species of seafood. Easy, straightforward recipes. Just found out that it was nominated. It is a finalist in the New England Cookbook Award called The Readable Feast, and we're very proud of that. It's a lot of work that went into this, and it's also up for the People's Choice Award. And since, hey, I have some people gathered here. Hey, if you like what you've seen here before or you just feel like voting, check out the link at the very top of the page there that Patrick has posted. That is a page where you can go to vote. A couple other things I wanted to share with you in those links up there. Last week, just before Thanksgiving, I was honored to be featured with my dear friend Steve Kerwood, the host of Living on Earth, the syndicated National Public Radio show. And we did a long feature piece about oysters and cooking for the holidays. So please check out that piece, which is archived there. And then the things that I am very grateful for, well, I'm an avid reader. I ingest 1-2 books a week. It used to be many more than that before, well, we have a 4-year-old and a 4.5-month-old in the house now. So barely get any reading done, but I have recently gone on a little spree and 2 books that I just wanted to share with you because they were absolutely amazing. Gaisi, I believe is the pronunciation of the name, and forgive me for getting it wrong. I've not looked up the phonetic spelling or pronunciation of Transcendent Kingdom. It's a book about faith and addiction, incredible novel written with eloquence and soaring form and just beautiful intelligence and wit. And well, it's also just a very fun read on a dark and difficult topic that allows all of us to feel a little bit better about ourselves, not because of others are down, but rather because it uplifts the human spirit, and we need that. So Transcendent Kingdom, and then a book I am long overdue in reading, Behind the Beautiful Forevers by Catherine Boo. It is astounding. I'm about halfway through it now, but it is utterly astounding. It reminds me of my very favorite book, which is Let Us Now Praise Famous Men by James Agee and Walker Evans, kind of a version of that, New Century. So anyway, not about cooking, but about gratitude and, well, the things that we care about, the things that we put on our plates. It's all one, right? And welcome to the Ruby family. So let's dive in and take some questions. All right, first and foremost, from Deborah S. Hi, Chef. My first Ruby class. So excited. Been a vegan for over 2 years, and this really year focused on whole food plant-based. I coach clients looking for transition and hope can gain confidence to show them it can be easy to eat healthy and delicious. Deborah, well, thank you. I appreciate that you are joining the Ruby family to help you and those you serve on your journeys. That's awesome. And hey, we look forward to supporting you in all of that. Please do reach out in any ways that we can help. And yeah, join us here for these live events and welcome. Awesome to have you. All right, next up. Hi, Chef. Do you have any tips? Let's see. Patrick just made that one disappear on me. Maybe we can get back to that one. All right, Sarah V. I'm wondering about the safety of keeping chopped garlic in olive oil in little silicone cups in the freezer, and about keeping garlic confit at room temperature for how long? Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask you, Sarah, is why are you storing it? And I don't ask this in a contentious way, but rather to visit. What I always like to do is, with any step in any process in cooking, is revisit not only the impetus for it, but the purpose of it at the end. So is it that you live on a garlic farm, as I do, and harvest 1,000+ heads of garlic every year and need some way to store an immense bounty? In that case, well, then yes, freezing garlic is a good idea. But otherwise, garlic is a very accessible product, right? And the quality of it is largely pretty uniform throughout the year. Sure, there are highs and lows of it. But so the first thing I would sort of beg you to consider is why do you need to store garlic? It's best if chopped fresh and then used as needed. In terms of the safety of storing it in oil and silicone cups in the freezer, to my knowledge, there's nothing unsafe about that other than typical sort of food shelf life issues. Botulism, which is the main concern with garlic in any form of preservation. Botulism needs air. Botulism requires an anaerobic environment. So when it is exposed to air, it is not, in my understanding of it, that is not an issue at that point. So you can safely keep it in there. That said, your garlic puts in danger everything else in your freezer. Okay. Now I know this because I'm a fish guy. I'm a fish guy. That's what I do, and I'm like a project fish guy. Like I ferment anchovies and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. So I had to get another freezer because my wife was like, "Yeah, my ice cream tastes like anchovies." All right. So if you want your ravioli or your popsicles or your pie crusts or whatever else you have in your freezer to smell like garlic, well, just take that into account. It's very hard to keep such strong, potent scents consolidated in the freezer. So in terms of keeping garlic confit on the countertop, I've had some on my countertop for just over 2 weeks now. I just used the very last of it this morning. I wouldn't go any longer than that, and I can't say that with surety that I would recommend that from a professional standpoint. However, that is a risk that I'm willing to take for my family. It was still tasting bright and fresh. The oil was still clear. It still had the same viscosity. The garlic hadn't leached any of its liquid. There wasn't a puddle of liquid at the bottom of it. So basically what I'm saying is that just by the visual cues, the oil was still intact. The garlic was still intact. And a key to that is that you're covering it, you're keeping it covered, and that anytime you dip into it, you're using a clean utensil. Never double dip or use something else because you were just introducing bacteria and you're going to ruin the shelf life of anything that you're touching. So, all right. I hope that helps. Thanks. Appreciate you. All right. From Kimula. Hey, Chef, do you have any tips for how I can offset sugar cravings and successfully transition from a lifelong carnivore to a vegan? All right. Well, I find that I have sugar cravings or sweet cravings when I am not properly, I don't have the proper nutrition or the right balance of nutrition in all of my other meals. That sugar craving is the result of your body crying out for something, because something is lacking, and sugar is the easiest, quickest form for us to get energy from. So the key for me to get rid of sugar cravings, or just to have the willpower to walk by the bin of Halloween candy for my son that's still sitting on top of the fridge, don't tell him it's there, by the way, please, is that I'm just satiated throughout the day with the regular diet. And that takes, a lot of practice. I mean, so many of you joining us here are here specifically to learn about how to functionally and fully maximize our nutrition throughout the day. So I'm not just saying this as an offhand comment. However, I also have just a ton of fruit around my house at all times. Dried fruit, to some extent, apricots without the preservatives. I just like the straight ones. Dates are very good, and these are very high in sugar. Yes, natural sugars, but just one small little bite of a Bahiri date. Whoa! I mean, that's all I need to get rid of that craving completely. But also apples. Just grapes. Everything around my house is oriented towards. Because I have a 4-year-old also. So, the very best part of childhood is, the freedom to dream, as well as somebody is giving you snacks all the time. So we have snacks everywhere, good ones. The other thing that I like to do, I just, a bottle of water that I carry around the house with me at all times, put some citrus juice in it. I mean, just a half an orange into that. And just the hint of sweetness from that orange juice diluted by a quart of water, still, it sort of satisfies a little bit of that psychological craving to me. And in terms of your question about how to convert from a lifelong carnivore into towards a vegan diet, I would say give yourself some leeway. Set yourself up on a process. Don't just focus on the goal. Being present in our lives is one of the most important things that we can do. And that means allowing ourselves some leeway. And it means acknowledging where we are today. So the first thing I would suggest, and this is something in our family we did, is write down a list of the dishes, the meat-based dishes, the non-vegan dishes that you just really love. The things that you really think you're going to miss. And just the ones that really speak to you, that have some spiritual connection or cultural, memory back for you, whatever it is. And write those down. And then allow yourself to go through the process of winnowing those out. Don't just stop cold turkey. I mean, it just didn't work for us. And because it left us wanting there's this sort of spiritual, cultural void. And that's very hard to fill with beans and rice and great food, but it's still just not that thing, right? So give yourself the option to wean off and to practice and get good at being almost entirely vegan. And holding on to those few things that you really want. And then once you're really good at being a vegan, then you're at a very strong point to be able to say, okay, now I can do without these because I know how to fill that spot. And it's that idea of process. It's that idea of giving yourself, acknowledging where you are today. And you know what? If you had a really crappy day at work and you can't pick up the kids and just life is chaos and blah, 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 and the only thing you can think to do is just go get a pizza, that's okay. That's okay. Acknowledge that. That's where you are today. That doesn't make you a failed vegan. It doesn't. I mean, you can even find a vegan pizza, but just, okay, you go get a pepperoni and cheese pizza. It doesn't make you a failed vegan. It means that you're a human on a path towards where you want to get to. So I hope that helps. All right, friends. What's up next? From Regina. Hi, Chef. A few questions related to desserts. Okay, I am not much of a dessert guy. I'll start off with that, but we do have some wonderful folks on staff. So if I can't ask them, support@ruby.com. We can forward this question on as well, but I'll try to answer. In order to call a dessert menu item vegan, do all the ingredients have to be organic? No. Vegan is a term that describes the absence of animal products. And organic is a legal definition of the methodology of the production of the product. So organic cinnamon has nothing to do with whether there was an animal involved in the process or not. And so those are two different just categories of looking at organizing food. One is legal, organic. You can't just call something organic in the marketplace. It is a legally defined and rigorously vetted term that conforms, practices that conform to very specific on-the-ground practices or regulations and rules. So that doesn't mean to say that great quality products that would conform to organic standards are any less. It might just be that that farmer hasn't chosen to pay into and audit and go through the whole process of being certified organic. So, I'm sorry, Patrick. There was one more question in that. There it is up at the top. Are there vegan food colorings, a certain brand? Is cocoa butter ever used as a fat in vegan desserts? So cocoa butter, yes, absolutely. Used in fat, used as a fat, a delicious one at that. In the ways in which it is substituted and the nuances of that, I'm not the one to ask, but Chef Fran, our vegan dessert specialist, certainly is. So we'll forward that question over to her. And in terms of vegan food colorings, absolutely, beets, chlorophyll, blanch and puree a little bit of spinach and squeeze it out. You'll get some chlorophyll right off the top of that. You get some, a little bit of beet juice, etc. There's natural pigments all throughout nature that can be used quite effectively. So, all right, thank you. From Marina, I just cooked a batch of black beans in the pressure cooker. They were soaked overnight, but now they're no longer black but gray. Is this normal? And how to prevent it? Thanks. I've never heard of black beans going gray. In fact, in all of my experience, when I cook black beans, they just get blacker. So I'm not sure about that. Maybe it was something to do with acidity and the pressure there, but I can't say why. But I will ask, were they delicious? If so, hey, cool, gray beans. Who would have thought? But in terms of how that pigment change happened, I don't know, and it could depend on the type of black bean that you were using as well. So I'm sorry that I don't have a specific answer for you there, but again, if it was delicious, cool, go with it. All right, from Susan, I gotta back up here. Cooking lentils, they still seem hard even after cooking the recommended time for recipes. Also interested in replacing my chef's knife and how to choose the right brand and size. Thank you, Susan. All right, so lentils. The first thing that most people, I think, where they err with lentils and other legumes is salting at the beginning. Salt at the beginning of the cooking process will harden some of those the fibers, and they just won't ever get past that done but yet still crunchy in a not great way. So I always cook lentils almost the way that I cook pasta, in a lot of boiling water, or in more water than is needed. It's not an exact ratio in terms of 1 cup lentils, 2 cups water, and they're going to absorb the whole thing and you're going to be done. I cook the lentils in whatever broth or whatever liquid I'm using, and then I strain them off once they are cooked to exactly where I want them to be cooked. And then I take the lentils and then I take just as much of the cooking liquid as I want in order to moisten the product, season them at that point, combine just the right amount of lentils and liquid. And in that way, I found that I have a lot more control over the doneness of the lentils. Because if you're trying to nail both the ratio of liquid and the right doneness on the lentils, you've got 2 variables there. But if all you're trying to do is cook the lentils to perfect and then later on deal with the viscosity and the liquidity of them, great. That's a lot easier to do. Plus, lentils, they are a product that changes over time. So if you have a jar of lentils that's been sitting up there for a year, they're going to cook differently than they did when you first got them, when they were fresher to harvest. We don't often think about beans, lentils, things having a half-life, but they certainly do change in subtle and nuanced ways as they age, they get drier, etc. So that's why I go with the method I just described. And in terms of a chef's knife, let's see. I have a lot of chef's knives. So a couple of different options for you. First is just to ask yourself, what are you doing with it? Do you really need a whole lot of specialty knives, or is really what you're doing chopping large vegetables, meaning chunks of carrots to roast, sometimes fine dicing vegetables like a shallot or julienning carrot, etc. Then you need, in my opinion, a smaller 8-inch, 10-inch knife that's just easy to use and just fits your hand. It won't tire you. You're not using too much knife for the process at hand. And really, to me, it's about balance. Now, I always taught folks hold knives by right above the handle, and then that's how you really measure the balance. And if it feels good in your hand, like you have some good, and I don't mean to be wagging my knife at you, like you have good control over it from this vantage point, that you can really have some flex and nuance to the movement, that's a good knife. If your knife is so big like this, or heavy, or out of balance, what you're going to find is that you're not going to be able to do the nuanced work up here at the tip that you need to be doing in order to dice your garlic. Sure, you're going to get those great big slices. Yeah, that's what big knives are great at, right? And they're great at giving you leverage because, boom, you can go far down like that and use the tool. But if really all you're after is the sort of typical kitchen activities, smaller knife, thin knife, if you want a rock to it, so if you're going to do that, look for one that has a little bit more of that rounded blade than the straighter sort of French style blade like that. Do you need a Santoku knife? Do you need an Asian vegetable knife? Do you need? No, if you get the right knife. And I would rather you spend some money. Like this one here is an R. Murphy knife, a small company out of Massachusetts that I've always loved. Carbon steel, and it's just absolutely wonderful. And I spent the money on a sharpener. And spend your money on maintaining a good knife rather than on a whole giant set of knives. And yeah, so that's my advice. But I also advise you to buy a knife in person if you can. You need to feel that weight, that balance, and you know what? You'll know when the knife feels right. It just feels good in your hand, and it's kind of like where you set the seat in your car. Yeah, there's a lot of variables to it, right? And you can go this way and that way. In modern cars, you can do this and that and raise your legs and blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, does it feel right? Cool. Like you're in the right spot. So same true with knives. All right, thanks. Appreciate you. All right, from Megan. Hello. The welcome email states it's recommended to have a 10-inch chef's knife on hand. So there are 7 topic videos in the course and selecting a basic knife set. I don't have one yet. How do I know which one to purchase? Do I need to get it before the course? It's a yes. Get it before the course. Get familiar with it. I mean, part of the course is certainly developing those knife skills, learning how to hold, to handle, getting physically fluent with that knife. Building a relationship with it, understanding how it works and how to work with it. In terms of what one to use, you know what? There are some absolutely fabulous knives that are available. I mean, Dexter makes some really great ones. Chicago Cutlery, and you can get these rubber handle knives for $15. You don't have to spend a lot of money on some steel from, harvested from an erupting volcano by eunuchs. I mean, it's like you can go so overly crazy with knives, and guess what? It doesn't make a difference. It's you. It's how you react to a knife. It's how you respond to it. So buy something that's within your price range. I recommend carbon steel. I like that the best the R. Murphy brand I like very much. But all of the classic brands, the Zwilling Henkels, etc., they're all really great knives. Misen, Misen, also makes a really good product. That is available online only, I believe. But check them out. It's really about price range. It's about design, and this is going to be your most used kitchen tool. Make sure you like it, right? I mean, it's going to be hanging around you every time you do anything in the kitchen pretty much. So, invest in it. Make something worthwhile. All right, Nick, thank you so much. All right, next, what is your best way to cook mackerel? Oh, hi, friend. Yeah, you and me can be friends. We like mackerel. My son's third favorite fish is mackerel. His first is bluefish. His second is salmon, or whatever I'm cooking tonight. And third is mackerel. I'm very lucky for that. I'm a huge fan of mackerel with hard herbs. Very few fish really take well to those hard, resinous, woody herbs like rosemary, sage, things like that. Lavender even. So I like cooking mackerel with those, just whether it's in olive oil and just throw in a sprig of that to flavor the oil as you gently saute the mackerel, or grilling it, whatever. I like pairing those flavors because they're not often as successful as could be with other seafood. So it's a sort of a bit of a unique opportunity there. But with mackerel, I like cooking it low and slow, like most seafoods. Mackerel is so fatty that I prefer to render out some of the fat, low and slow heat, in order to give it this just wonderful, tense, but also yielding custard-like texture to it. Sure, it does well when seared over high heat and crisped and cooked very quickly. But I found also that I don't always love or appreciate as much as I would the opposite when that fat renders and burns in a grill and flames back. Some of that is great, but poaching mackerel is about my favorite way to do it, just sort of regularly. Good acidic bouillon, court bouillon there, lots of white wine, maybe even some red wine vinegar, some sweets, something onion, carrot, something sweet that really draws out the inherent kind of acidity in mackerel. That's my favorite way to cook. But it's such a versatile fish. It's hard to say favorite, other than, hey, if it's good, buy it and eat it, any which way it comes. Hey, thank you for your question. Appreciate it. All right, from Jerry. Hi, Chef. Never been to a cooking class, much less one online. I would appreciate if you explain the process and what to expect. Very excited and looking forward. Well, awesome. Well, welcome to the Ruby family. We're thrilled to have you. So the process here, we walk you through every step in every course. We tell you how to learn with Ruby. It is a very sophisticated but also straightforward learning module pedagogy, if you will. Every sort of learning outcome is well stated before you go into the task at hand. The information is very concisely and clearly, visually, and offered in written word as well. And there's constant opportunities for knowledge validation, whether it's a quiz, whether it's a test, whether it's an image upload activity, or just you finding a recipe that's related to that task at hand today and then cooking it for dinner that evening. And that the chefs are constantly interacting with you back and forth on your tests, quizzes, upload activities, etc. gives you the opportunity to have not real-time feedback, but a fairly personal and intimate experience and good quality feedback directed at exactly what you're doing. And what I really like about it is that it works on your schedule. So, one of the great things about this is that it allows you to take your time. And I hope that you will find great interest in one little thing or technique. And you know what? Hey, press pause. Cook that for 2 nights. Really practice on that. Stay with the Saute chapter. Don't just necessarily go to the next one. Stay with it. Work it. Really get familiar with it. And, this course is ultimately for you. So follow it as you will. But, hey, a lot of successful graduates so far, and we really hope that you enjoy your experience and that you enjoy your time as part of the Ruby family. Cheers. Welcome. All right, from Dorothy. Hi, Chef. What staples should we have? Ooh, That's a broad and great question. What should we keep in the freezer? What's the best way to peel a mango? All right, 3 very interesting questions. So, what should we have? What staples should we have on hand? I have a lot of beans on hand. I also grow a huge amount of beans that I dry. I have a huge amount of garlic on hand because I grow about 1,200 heads of garlic. I also have a huge amount of squash on hand because I have a whole patch. I have a lot of potatoes on hand because I grow potatoes as well. Otherwise, after that product is just on our farm, it's really seasonal. So the things that are really staples, though, that I think you really should have, invest in your spices and herbs. Now, the ones that I like the most: fennel seed, bay leaf, cumin, coriander are all really great. They just add so much depth and richness to whatever you're doing. So I also recommend to buy them in bulk and then use them in bulk. It's $8 or $7 to buy a thing of bay leaves that's this big, and it's $15 to buy a pound of bay leaves that comes in a bucket. And so to me, in my kitchen, bay leaves are something that I use by the handful. Yeah, it's not something that underpins and augments flavors subtly. It's like, oh, that's a flavor I really like. When you find the spices that you do really like that you constantly find yourself going towards, buy them in bulk and use them in bulk. Don't be afraid of them. But that said, you don't need to have every single spice. You don't. Like, I don't use powdered oregano. I don't. There's nothing that I use whole cloves for that I can't use ground clove for. Just looking around the kitchen, I also I powder my own cumin. I powder my own coriander because I buy the seeds. And so I don't need to have one of each. You're just doubling the speed at which your product is going to go bad if you're buying both. So think about it that way, and sort of always with a little bit of a reductionist tendency towards your spice cabinet. And bottom line is almost every herb can be replaced by something in some way. And so in most recipes, but just don't go overboard with your spice pantry. Buy things in bulk and use them quickly. I also use a lot of chili peppers, a huge amount of chili peppers, and I have a number of different formats of them, ranging from wet, like soaked in vinegar, to dried and smoked, to dried regular, to powdered. These are the things that I use to just add so much punctuation, poignancy to any dish. And that little hint of spice, it blooms so many flavors. So whatever else it is that you're cooking, these are sort of the tricks that I use. The other is citrus, lemons, limes. A dash of acidity in things makes just about everything better. I'm hard pressed to think of something where it doesn't augment it or make more beautiful, more bold the flavor. So from a flavor standpoint, there you go. In terms of staples from seasoning, I use one kind of salt. I use the red box of kosher salt, Diamond Crystal. The reason for that is salting is a physical action, right? I know exactly how much that amount of salt is going to make something, how much it's going to season something, right? Why? Because I've done it 173,000 times. It's a physical memory. If you use different salts constantly, one at the table, one here, you buy a blue box of salt this week, a red box of salt next week, etc. You've got a different kind of salt up there. You're using 4 completely different ingredients in terms of the volume of the amount of sodium per volume of the physical action of salting. So learning how to salt something appropriately is key to healthy cooking. So using a salt that you know how to use is important. In terms of other staples, I mentioned beans, I mentioned rice. I have several different kinds of rice on hand, mostly brown rice. What else do I always have on hand? 1 or 2 kinds of olive oil. I buy olive oil in bulk by the 120 ounce jars there. I go through several of those a month. And yeah, Otherwise, don't be afraid to have some cans of cooked beans around, or those pouches of cooked quinoa or lentils or whatever. I mean, yes, you're buying lentils and water and somebody to apply heat for them. But you know what? On Tuesday night, if the answer is opening up a pouch of this or buying, getting a pizza delivered just because of the chaos of your day, hey, I mean, that's a pretty great thing to have in your pantry on hand. So, of course, there's so much more to that answer, but I hope that helps. All right, from Judith. Oh, hi, friend. Thanks for all these amazing courses. Well, of course, cheers. Do you have a favorite New Year's Eve seafood recipe for two? Yes, I do. Well, many. I really like poaching salmon for New Year's Eve. For two, you're not going to do this, but I like around Christmas time, I will poach an entire whole salmon and then glaze it with a homemade aioli mixed with a little bit of gelatin and spread that over the top. And as it cools down, it forms this beautiful crust. And then I put little cucumber scales, thin shaped cucumbers on, and it's fun, right? And I have the time to do it between the two holidays, and it's fun and it's interesting. So for two, get yourself a side of really great salmon, a pound and a half or so, and do that. Poach it very, very low and slow in a very flavorful court bouillon. Red wine in there. Throw some cloves in there. Throw mustard seed, bay leaves, thyme. Really deep, rich flavors to it. And let it poach very low and slow. Let it cool in that liquid. Pull it out when it's just room temperature. Pat it dry. It'll be reddish colored. And then do that little aioli or just a mayonnaise trick, something like that. And hey, it's fun. It's interesting. It's visually appealing. It's a process cooking that folks like you, I think, tend to enjoy. Take your time with it. Enjoy. But I also think I saw that you had also commented that you had asked for some of my cookbooks for Christmas. So I hope that Santa has heard you. And, there are lots and lots of ideas in there. I'd love to hear what you do make. So I look forward to joining. Hopefully you can join us next week after next for the Feast of the Seven Fishes event. And that might give you some other ideas too. Hey, thanks, Judith. Always nice to see you. All right. I'm going to scroll up here. From Lindsay, taking the Essential Vegan Dessert course. I can always make it to these live events, office hours. Questions go unanswered, supported by live instructors. Thanks. So yeah, we've just support@ruby.com, and someone will be back to you within 2 days, but more often than not, almost always within just a couple of hours. And there you go. So we're here with you. All right, I'm going to head down another one. In one of the Ruby videos, saw that rice is stirred with a metal fork. Should we use a wooden spoon instead to avoid breaking the rice? I've seen it done both ways. In some great Middle Eastern cooks that I've worked with used a fork. In Indian, a cook that hailed from India that I worked with, who was, oh my gosh, she was an incredible cook. She used a fork to fluff the basmati rice that gave it just a different texture, more voluminous. However, I know in a lot of the Asian cooks, in heritage cooks that I've worked with, had used those paddle spoons. And I think the difference is, are you looking for a slightly glutinous, slightly tacky texture to it? It also depends on the amount of liquid that you've cooked it with. But both a fork and a paddle will work to fluff the rice, giving you a slightly different texture. So I think it's really more about what you're after in terms of the end result. Hope that helps. All right, from Kathy, my oven has the following functions: bake, convection bake, and convection roast. I know the difference between bake and convection bake. What's the difference between convection bake and convection roast? I don't know. So, yeah, so the way that I've always understood the difference between baking and roasting is more about the dish you're cooking rather than the application of the heat. So it's not so much about the verb as it is about the noun. Roast chicken. It's really more about the chicken than it is about the roasting. So, but what I believe is happening there is that roasting applies a little bit more heat from on top, whereas baking provides more of an ambient, regulated temperature. Roasting allows for a little bit more of a fluctuation in temperature. But I will say that as I understand the difference between baking and roasting is that you roast things that start off with a solid texture, carrots, chicken, and you bake things that start off with a viscous texture, dough, batter, things that are raw. So you bake to cook and you roast to change. Change the texture, add flavor, etc. So, but as that relates to the functions on your oven, my best guess would be that it's a difference in how much the regulator allows the temperature to fluctuate, and potentially whether it fires from a top and below at the same time rather than just below. But there are as many ovens as there are cooks, so I'm sorry that I can't give you a very specific answer there. All right, from Julie. I made your turkey leg confit and had great results. Awesome. Yeah, I'm thrilled. Awesome. Questions. Does the protein need to be 100% submerged in the fat? And how does duck fat differ than vegetable oil? Do you add the cure to the cook pot? Okay, so a couple questions there. Yes, the protein should be submerged in the fat for even cooking. Just off the bat, that is an important function of it. Although, if you do need to, if you're doing small quantities and don't want to pour 7 cups of oil onto just 2 turkey legs, I get it. And yes, you can gently flip at some point during the process. So not absolutely necessary, but as a preserving method, a duck confit was originated as a means to preserve the legs throughout the season. And when properly cured, properly cooked, and then submerged in fat, it keeps for quite a long time. So that is not that's why you want to make sure that it's covered in terms of preserving and giving you that 2-week shelf life or so that in the modern era you might be looking for. How does duck fat differ than vegetable oil? Well, hugely in terms of flavor. In other ways, for this purpose, in not many ways, you're not talking about smoke point or the temperature it can go up to. So you're not stressing the oil in this way at all. You're really just a very low, slow oil poach. So really, what you're talking about is flavor, but you're also talking about many dollars between duck fat and vegetable oil. And the last one was, do you add the cure to the cooking pot? I did. I went with a slightly lower, because there was so much garlic, so much fennel seed, so much rosemary in the pounded, mortar and pestle cure that I wanted all of that in there. Most of the salt and sugar, because of the 24-hour cure time that I had on this recipe, was, I believe, like 3 tablespoons of salt and 1 tablespoon of sugar. For 2 turkey legs off of a 10 to 12 pound turkey. That salt kind of runs off. Any extra salt will liquefy and run off. You don't want to put in all that exuded liquid, but yeah, scrape out any of that rosemary fennel mixture, throw that in the pot. It slowly caramelizes, gets all sorts of tasty, sexy good, and it's good. All right. Hey, I'm glad you tried it. Thanks for that. All right, confit add-on. How does white meat confit? Can you recommend a cookbook that focuses on confit? Let's see. Cookbook. There's a charcuterie book by, I believe, Michael Ruhlman, Ruhlman, that has a really good recipe in there. Paul Bertoli, Cooking by Hand, it has a really great duck confit recipe in there. And that book is just fantastic. Paul Bertoli was one of the longtime chefs at Chez Panisse, and it's an incredible book, Cooking by Hand by Paul Bertoli. Thomas Keller has a really good confit recipe that you can find online. But in terms of a confit-focused cookbook, I might point you towards my good friend Hank Shaw has a website, Hunt Gather Cook. He does a lot with wild game, and he's got a big section on confit in his recipes selection there, and a couple of books of his as well. So, and in terms of does white meat confit, yes, but not nearly to the same luscious texture and flavor as does the leg meat. You're really just dealing with two different forms of muscles, high activity muscle and low activity muscle. It's like saying, does filet mignon make a good, beef stew? Well, yes, but not really, because it just kind of fizzles out to nothing. There isn't much left there. There's no connective tissue to break down, no collagen. It's not really what you're looking for as the result of this beautiful time-intensive process. So, yes, you can. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Okay, from Julie. Also made Thanksgiving mashed potatoes. Hey, awesome. Oh, great. That's awesome that you joined us, and I appreciate the feedback. It's great. All right, from Sabrina, can you share a fail-proof recipe for tofu as a main dish for dinner? I have no confidence in my ability to cook it. Wow. So many are coming to mind, and I think the fail-proof there is to identify other things that you're really going to love. Sort of, aim for the dish, not necessarily just the tofu. So what immediately comes to mind is a tomato stew. So take some pieces of tofu, whether I would say hard, firm tofu. Cut them, pat them dry, salt them a little bit, pat them dry again, sear them in some olive oil just to get a little bit of color, to develop the flavor just a little bit, and then remove from pan. And then start up a dish like a Veracruz sauce or a puttanesca sauce, a mafe, which is a West African tomato and peanut stew. So saute some onions, some garlic, throw in a hot chili pepper, throw in some bay leaves, some fennel, white wine, simmer that down till it's soft and tender. Throw in a couple of cans of tomatoes, simmer again till that rawness of the tomato is gone and all those flavors are integrated. And then throw your tofu back in and let simmer a minute, and then let it all cool down with a cover on it together. And that together, you're going to make a dish that, of course, you're going to like it. I mean, of course you're going to like it because it's so tasty, made with all these incredible ingredients. So I find that this is the case oftentimes, even with animal proteins as well. People get so hung up on that one ingredient and making it tasty and delicious that they forget that the true joy of the meal is, it's the dish. So to me, that is more fail-proof because you're going to like it. Cheers. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it. All right, from Carol Ann. Hey, Chef Barton, could you please describe your kitchen and what you like best about it? Well, my kitchen is big. It is 3 rooms of our house. We live in an 1820 farmhouse right here on the coast of Maine. Very small little salt box, an old cape. Pretty small original footprint. Added on to that house in the 1950s was a 2-car garage. And then later on in the 1980s, a barn with a living space above it was added on. And slowly the living space crept into these new buildings. So the family that we bought this house from converted the 2-car garage into the kitchen and is connected to the main house. And so it serves as our living room, our dining room. I have my Peloton in here. It also serves as an entryway, an exit back to the backyard. So it's also sort of a farmer's working portal. So there's a lot going on here. But it's open. It's light. It's bright. There is, except for what's behind me here, the rest of the entire room is windows. We have a very large island. It's 11 feet long and 4 feet wide. I have slate countertops quarried here in Maine, which is awesome. When we were building our kitchen, we kept getting delayed on the slate, and it didn't come, and it didn't come, and it didn't come, and we, called the guy, and he was like, "Listen, man, it's been a bad winter. A bunch of people died, so we've been busy making the headstones. Your kitchen has to wait." I was like, God bless Maine. I love this place, and perfectly good reason to wait and be patient. Anyway, it's this beautiful slate. We tested it out before we put it in. I got a sample of it, and I tried to destroy it, meaning I heated it up in the oven at 550 and then put a hot pan on top of it with some oil between them. I put scalding hot things on it. I let it sit in water. I bleached it, etc. I tried to do everything that I could to destroy it. And, well, it worked out. It held up, so we made the investment and got it. I like open shelving. I like access to my pantry. Not all people love open shelving. It does require a little bit more maintenance because, well, grease that ends up in the air, just via the cooking process, deposits more. But I love the space. The other thing that I really love that we did is deep countertops. Oftentimes countertops are 2 feet deep. We went 3 feet deep. And that gives me the room to store equipment, Vitaprep, ingredients, toaster oven, and still have space to work in front of it, so that the entire kitchen is sort of a free flow of effort. Sink is over here, cooktop is over here, and I don't have a traditional refrigerator in the kitchen either. I have an under-counter dorm fridge here, and in the next room over, I have the big fridge. And, well, I was a professional cook. I worked in restaurants. I know what it is to organize your thoughts to go to the walk-in, which is never by the stove, right? And so this is the way I got good at cooking and understanding sort of these are the immediate, reach for ingredients, and then those are the ingredients that I plan to use. So I sort of organize it that way, and that way it keeps this broad open scape, viewscape, so that there's no hulking, refrigerator to break up the lines. And that's just our preference. The other thing I really love is I built this cutting board in. I'm going to scan down a little bit. Can you help? No. Hey, my wife and my 4-month-old just showed up. So I've got a very big cutting board. Cutting board, other than your knife. Anytime you're using a knife, you should be using cutting board, right? So the most used piece of static equipment in your kitchen, get a good one. John Booz makes some really good ones. This is a very large cherry wood block, and I have it set in to the countertop just an inch down so that it slides right in, it slides right out, and I can clean all around it. You never want to give yourself a nasty crevice that you can't get to. But it's inset, it's right here, it's right on the edge, it's firm, it's located, I can do whatever I want on it without fear of it moving. And then, very importantly, watch this. There's my trash, right there.
And your compost.
Compost bin in the front, because oftentimes if you're working, your onion, whatever it is, goes right into the compost and kicks right closed. Trash right behind that. It's those little actions like that that make cooking a lot more fun and a lot more fluid. And you begin to be able to really choreograph your meals to your space. And I also have a record player in here because music and cooking and, family and everything good. So, this is the place that you live. You spend a lot of time here. So make it a place that reflects you. All right. Hey, thanks for that question. Appreciate it. All right. Chef, was wondering if you'd share some tips on freezing leftovers from containers to the time we can keep it. Sure. Leftover, it varies in terms of the time. My dad likes to tell me it's very easy to fill up a freezer. It's very hard to empty it, to remember to use this stuff. It's out of sight, out of mind. Most people's freezers are not a place they go to every day. In my house, the freezers are literally in different rooms. So think about that aspect of it. Really give yourself a plan or a system to ensure that you're using your leftovers. It's not just a place to put it because you have them. Make sure you have a plan to get them back. So whether that's a spreadsheet, I just said spreadsheet, the least sexy thing in the world. Just a list of what you have in there and keep it up to date so that you can glance at it and know. In terms of time, depends. 6 months is usually about the limit in terms of what's recommended for food safety. That said, stuff lives in my freezer a lot longer than that, and I eat it, and that's the way life is. But 6 months is what I would recommend on the top level of that. In terms of the way that I store them in plastic bags. Yes, we have Tupperware Tupperware is annoying. It's just annoying. It's the one thing in my kitchen that I haven't figured out how to manage. I managed everything else. My pot tops, they all sit in a, I basically just got a dish drying rack and shoved it into one of the cabinets so that every pot stays upright and lined up, right? I managed everything else for efficiency in my kitchen, but I just can't manage Tupperware. I just don't want it around and have to deal with it all. So I use plastic bags. Yes, they're single use, but I acknowledge that and I make amendments for that in other ways. But the other thing about them is that they can store flat. So whether you're doing liquid, stocks, etc., you measure them out. You know that you have 2 cups turkey stock in this bag, and then you freeze them on a sheet tray so they freeze flat and then store that way easily. That's how I do it in our house, but all up to you. Okay, from Linda, can you share your best tips for steaming crab legs? Suggestions or best results? Sure. Temper them, bring them up to room temperature if you can. Crab legs almost always come frozen, unless you're getting them live or fresh, which is pretty rare. Sometimes they'll be thawed out for you if you're buying them in a store, but you know what? That they are frozen well is a convenience to you. So just buy them frozen, because otherwise the store has already started the clock for you. And that to me actually just puts you behind 8 ball, because now you're working on the crab leg schedule. Just buy them frozen. Know that you're going to plan to use them. Pull them out of the freezer the night before. Put them on a tray in your refrigerator, uncovered or covered if you want, but they don't really need to be covered. And let them thaw out. Shake off any ice that's still clinging to them, just that outer sheath of ice that they are glazed with. And then bring them up to, if you can, let them sit out for half an hour to an hour. Bring them up to room temperature, just a little bit, because that way you're not fighting hot heat against cold crab inside of a dense shell, right? It's the heat. It's that high heat, that violent action of trying to heat something up that reduces quality. You want things to meet in the middle. And if you start far apart, well, the middle is a harder ground to gain, right? So temper them a little bit. Just bring them up to room temperature. And I recommend doing this for roast chicken. Do it for a piece of salmon, etc., steak, everything. It's you have a little bit more control when you're not fighting cold with hot, but rather you're starting a little bit closer to each other. For steaming, you don't really need to flavor them. Crab legs, you're talking stone crab, if you're talking Opelio, wild Alaska king crab, etc. They've got such incredible flavor, whether you're dipping them in an aioli afterwards, melted butter with lemon. You don't need all the spice thrown in there. So I just steam them just in water, right? And use a pan that's big enough. I like to lay them out horizontally rather than vertically. The reason for that is I try not to submerge one part of it, but not the other. Cook them in small batches too. You don't need to cook 5 pounds of crab legs all at once, because you can't eat them all at once, right? So boil them in 2 batches. Use a pot that you can control the heat over. Use a top. Don't let it boil over, because crab protein is really hard to clean. So there you go. The other thing I would recommend, though, is maybe not steaming them. Try them under the broiler. I cooked them just the other night in my toaster oven. I put them right under the broil function. Tempered them, brought them up to room temperature, and then seared them. And that singe on the shell that you get either from broiling or from grilling is incredible, and adds such a unique and different flavor to it. That's really worth trying. Okay, thanks. All right, from Deborah, I struggle with spice herbs to use with what, and which combine well and which compete. I do not use oil. I'm looking for ideas on how to incorporate more natural spices. Thank you. There's a really great book called A Culinary Artistry by Karen Dornenberg and Andrew Page, or Karen Page and Andrew Dornenberg. Culinary Artistry. That's a really great book that goes through just flavor matching. It is an incredibly sophisticated book that is so easy to use and so illustrative, but also just inspiring in terms of flavor. So I recommend checking out that book, not just for herbs and spices, but just for a host of what goes with what. And if you're not using oil, if you're paring down your techniques and the ingredients you're using, you want the most bang for your buck with those pairings. So study them, learn them. So check out that book. But also just think about cuisines, cumin and coriander and onion and sumac and chili and mint. Okay, great. Yeah, got it. Those all, I've had all of those on hummus before. Cool. Chances are they go really well together. Well, they do, yes. When you start thinking about spices like oregano and dill, we're talking about both ends, either end of Europe here. It starts to get a little wonky. Yeah. But you know what? It's still going to taste good. It might not be the world's most perfect pairing, but bottom line is you're not going to screw it up. You're just not going to, right? I mean, unless you're using way too much of anything, but then that's functional, not sort of formulaic in terms of what the problem is there. So, study those sort of base flavor families, if you will, so that you begin to have that familiarity of what goes with what. Cheers. All right. Thank you, Deborah. All right. Another question here. For cooking chicken, is it a good idea to put the chicken in the pan that has just been taken away from the stove, or better to put the chicken directly in the pan that's on the stove? In first instance, there would be no cracklings. Well, if you're putting it if you're talking about a crackling sound, you're talking about a saute. If you're talking about a saute, you're talking about coloration, crisping, caramelization. So with that, you're talking high heat. If you are talking high heat and trying to accomplish those things, then you want to use a pan that is preheated. Whenever I add anything to a pan that is preheated, I always bring it off the stove and I lay whatever it is in carefully. The exception being, okay, I've got a giant, brazier and I'm doing, several pounds of zucchini. Yeah, I'll just kind of arm it in there, fine. But the thing here that I'm most worried about is splashing the oil. Your shirt collars, your shirt sleeves, your arm hair, etc. Working over the flame is just going to create an immediacy that you might not want or need. So pull the pan back off the heat, or just turn the heat off under the pan. Lay the chicken breast in or the leg in, skin side down, I'm assuming, if you're doing that. Shake the pan just a little bit. Allow the liquid and that's just been introduced to the oil to spark and to crackle a little bit. And then slide back onto the heat and turn the heat back on. The other reason for this is when you add something to a pan, you're creating a cloud. Especially when anything has just even a touch of moisture on it, it's going to hit the liquid, hit the oil, and vaporize. And if you're right on the heat, well, you're then going to incinerate that cloud, and the flame ends up in your pan. You ever seen those, the shows where the cooks are really dramatic, digging the pan into the flame, and you do that again, you're not working at my restaurant. You're done. You get one warning about that in my restaurants, and you were done. You were just not paying attention to your own physical safety, to that around you, or to the quality of the dish. And burned oil tastes like nothing good, and there's no way to get rid of it. Literally, you have to start again in terms of just what it does to the flavor of things. And so, from all of those vantage points, pull it off the heat, or moderate the heat in some way. Lay it in. Once it's settled into the oil, swirl it a little bit and put it back. There you go. Okay, what's the best way to make seashell sauce for mackerel? I don't know what seashell is. Seashell sauce is. I don't know. I'll have to look that up and get back to you. And yeah, I don't know anything about that. Maybe you could inform us about it, but that's not a part of cuisine that I'm familiar with. So cheers. Thanks for that. I appreciate the inspiration to go learn something. All right, from Warren, how do you recommend cooking dried beans? Thank you. Soak them overnight is the best way to give yourself a great place to start from. If you can't soak them overnight, just pour boiling water over them and let them sit for about an hour. Make sure you comb through for any that float to the surface, any that are broken, the peels are wonky, any rocks, certainly, although I haven't seen that for many years. Anything that just doesn't look right to you, pull it out. And then for beans, I'm just learning how to use a crock pot myself and just throw in whatever flavoring you have. I have a bunch of sofrito that I keep in the freezer, or whether it's just carrot, celery, onion, bell pepper, whatever it is. Just chunk those up, throw the beans and the liquid into the crock pot or onto the stove. And again, just like with the lentils, I tend to cook beans with a lot more liquid than that perfect ratio of beans are cooked and the liquid is gone. I actually like them sitting in a big pot of bean broth. That's fine. And if you're worried about overcooking them, great. Strain off the beans as soon as they're fully cooked, cool them down a little bit, then add the liquid back as needed. Season at that point. So season your beans only after they're cooked or just at the very end of the cooking process. But ultimately, one of the things that beans taste really good. Let them taste like beans. Don't think you need to add bacon and ham hocks and blah, 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 and this and that. And you know what? Just a couple of accents to it, a bay leaf, a little bit of thyme, etc. But anything that you add into beans that you want to get back out, make sure it is in a form that you can see. Meaning, don't chop up your thyme stems real finely. Don't crumble your bay leaf. Don't crush a clove or a clover, put it in there and just let it disappear only to find it later. So, hey, hope that helps. Thanks. All right, from Adam, should we always saute or somehow cook mushrooms before we include them in a raw green salad? No, not necessarily. Raw mushrooms can be absolutely delicious. Not all mushrooms should be eaten raw. I'm thinking necessarily of morels and porcini, which I believe, if I remember correctly, really should be cooked from a health standpoint. It kind of mitigates some of the toxins in them, but they're not poisonous raw, but they're better for you. But also, most mushrooms just taste better cooked, especially some of the forage mushrooms. Chanterelles, for example, come to mind, bluet mushrooms, black trumpets. You want to augment or change or sort of evolve, mature their flavor. But in terms of just a raw green salad, hey, shaved cremini mushrooms right out of the box. They're absolutely delicious. And in fact, I think they're better raw. They have a wonderful, slightly chalky yet yielding texture to them that's also creamy at the same time. It's wonderful. I pureed creminis into cremini stems into a salad dressing as a means to make it creamy without adding egg yolk or dairy to it. So there's many ways to use it, but also the flavor of a raw mushroom is highly aromatic, whereas the flavor of a cooked mushroom is much more weighty. It's sort of on the palate, back palate. You get a lot more of that woodsiness to it. Raw mushrooms, you get a lot more of that sort of forest scent, not forest floor, if you think about it that way. Cheers. All right. How do you keep the duck from getting dry when you fry it and put it in the oven? Okay. So when you fry duck skin hides beneath it a huge, thick laminated layer of fat. And so I put it in a cold pan, skin side down, and let it render very slowly over low heat. Let the fat render out. If you try and cook it on high heat, you're never going to get that fat rendered out, and you're just going to end up with a crisp on the outside, but not crisp to its full extent, soft and gooey underneath with the fat you just don't like, and then the duck breast itself would likely be overcooked too. Let it cook low and slow, one side up, until it's about halfway done, which might take 20 minutes or so, and then flip it over, and over very low heat, just let it cook through. And if you really want it crispy, then just the very last minute, sear over high heat on that skin side to get that final crispness to it. So, all right, just a couple more, and then I've got to run. It's daycare duty for me again here coming up. So, hi, Chef. How do I make dried orange and lemon peel? When I peel the citrus skins with a peeler, some of the bitter pith comes off the rind. How much lemongrass stalk do I use? Well, they're just a couple inches close to the root. Thank you. All right, Sharon. Thanks for your questions. So once you peel citrus, let me just grab a lemon because I can show you. If you peel it, and I've just got this Y peeler, nice long thin strips, yes, you will end up with some of the rind in there. But then what you can do is place it flat on a cutting board. Now cutting towards yourself, so this is not recommended to do, but with extreme caution. And place the knife right along the board, pushing down with the back side of the knife, and just very gently sort of slice along. And you end up with your rind, you know, an extremely thin little piece of it, and you end up with your lemon peel. So there you go. That's one way to mitigate this once peeled, and that's not even very deeply peeled. You can see I haven't broken through the rind to the pith to the fruit yet. The other thing is to, hey, Sharon, you know what? Some of that rind is actually quite delicious. Bitterness is a really nice component in dishes that adds a lot. You don't want too much of it, obviously, but that balance of the fruity, sour, acidic, lemon or orange peel with a little bit of bitterness underneath it can be quite charming and in fact, very elegant. So don't be afraid of them. Yeah, so there you go. Right, excuse me. All right. Last question here, and then I've got to run. What's the best way to clean a fish fillet with skin on one side before cooking? Rinse, damp cloth, dry towel, and how long should I let it rest after salting? Great live events, of course. Hey, thanks. If you mean by clean, you mean just prep for cooking. And in that case, pat it dry, potentially even scrape it with the back side of a knife gently. You don't want to rip the flesh apart by any means. And if you are going to do that, go from tail side towards the head. That's just the direction that the muscles are organized in. So you're not pulling against the physical integrity of the fillet itself. And you do that only very gently to scrape off any moisture that's down in any crevices or little pores there. All of that is not really necessary, though. Patting it dry before sauteing it works perfectly well. But if you're talking about skinning a fish, that is a separate technique and task that you just wedge your knife a little bit under the skin so that you can gain purchase on it, again, from the tail side, and then placing your knife flat against the board because, well, the skin, right, it's right at the very bottom. So if you have your fingers on the board, where's your hand? Your knife is automatically above where the skin and the flesh meet, meaning you're going to cut through flesh. So keep your knife off the board so that your knife is parallel with exactly the place you want to cut. And then once you gain purchase on that skin, use the skin to pull the fillet back. Don't move your knife. Use the skin to do the motion in a sawing, in sort of a reverse sawing. Use the wood to saw against the blade almost in that way. So, and in that way, you're not trying to push or pull, and you're not ripping the fillet at all. You're just pulling that skin off. All right. And, oh boy, we got a lot more questions, and I'm sorry I'm not able to get to all of them today. As I said, I do have daycare duty, so any of your questions, please send to support@ruby.com, and we'll try and answer them. If not, I will try and get back to some of you as well. But please join me week after next for our next edition of these live events for the Feast of the Seven Fishes, our traditional Italian Christmas seafood feast. And then also, if I could, please, up at the very top there, Patrick has provided a link. My book, Joy of Seafood, is nominated for the People's Choice Award and the Readable Feast Awards. Hey, if you like what we're doing here, please sign on in and vote for me. I appreciate it. But all of the books in the list are written by incredible authors, friends, colleagues. All of them are worth supporting. Treat the whole list as a gift guide, gift suggestions. And as always, keep cooking. Feeding people is an act of love. It's an act of kindness. I appreciate you. I appreciate your interest in food. I appreciate you being part of the Ruby family. Take care and bon appetit.